Hello, welcome back to Bar Snacks. It's been a while. We've had the summer, but we're back. New clock. Today I'm going to be talking about a book I read recently that has changed my perspective quite a bit. About how I think about things such as government intervention and income. I recently read a book by the conservative, libertarian economist Thomas Sowell. It's called Economic Facts and Fallacies, and it came out in 2008. This is an absolutely fantastic economics book. It's very well researched, almost scarily well researched, and heavy use of statistics from around the world. For example, in the chapter about the housing market, he doesn't just use examples from the US, but also how rent control has been detrimental in Egypt as well, to show that his ideas do have geoeconomic significance. And what's really interesting about the conservative and libertarian viewpoint is it's different to what we're traditionally exposed to at school. We tend to be fed, I think at my school in particular, we tend to be fed this liberal, highly government intervention, government-centric type of economics. And this is a complete detachment of that. And I think it's changed the way I consider some of these basic economic concepts. By far the best chapter in the book is the one about income fallacy. There's a lot of problematic things around income, especially considering income is a really fickle measurement and its connection to wealth isn't especially large. I could be earning absolutely nothing one year and then sell my house, and suddenly I've had a huge amount of income in 1 year. Income isn't a very strong economic measure, and because of that, a lot of fallacies have come out of income statistics and how we interpret income statistics, and Thomas Sowell has explained it so well here. I'm going to give some examples because I think this chapter is absolutely fantastic. So here's an example of a problematic household statistic. Real income growth per household from 1969 to 1996 rose only 6% in America. That sounds like a terrible picture. Wages have hugely stagnated over almost 3 decades. And if you took a conclusion from just that statistic, you'd think there'd be some kind of market failure in that incomes haven't managed to grow in 30 years. But actually, per capita income over the same time period rose 51%. This demonstrates so well how flawed the household statistic is, because that was right through the baby boomer years. So the number of people per household increased significantly, and because it's not a constant figure, it makes the rise seem way less drastic than it actually is on a per-person basis. Now, this next one's really interesting, because I didn't know this, and I think it made me draw my own fallacy when we studied a bit of macroeconomics back in GCSE economics, when we studied macroeconomics and equitable distributions of wealth and income. Most income statistics are pre-transfer payments, so that's welfare, benefits, etc., and pre-income tax, which skews the line of income distribution to make it more dramatic than reality. Because the bottom half of the population receive the most in transfer payments, because we have things like means-tested payments, which only go to those people. And the top half pays more income tax because they earn more income. So when we get some income distribution like the Lorenz curve, if that is pre-transfer payment and pre-income tax, it's more dramatic than reality. I think this one is probably the most important statistics-wise. I don't think that income statistics should be created pre-transfer payment and pre-income tax, because that does not actually reflect the real income that people are earning. Another great chapter that Sowell writes is about the premises that government intervention is required to have a good housing market. It's probably his most vehemently defended argument. What he's talking about here is people getting an idea of extortionate rents and fastly rising house prices and automatically conclude that more government intervention is needed in the market. However, Sowell says that because of government intervention in the market, that's why housing prices have gone so far up. There's some obvious and less obvious parts to this. Clearly, government intervention that mandates open space and limits building due to zoning restrictions will curtail supply. That will increase prices due to the market mechanism. Clearly. It's more nuanced points about more auxiliary activities such as rent control that are interesting as well. Sowell argues that the imposition of rent control has actually caused a serious problem in that it limits the amount of units that people are able to live in because there's less profit motive for constructors and landlords, etc. And the great example that he uses here is Houston. So Houston has no zoning laws whatsoever, no laws about that at all. And in Houston, still, the housing market is much more affordable than somewhere like San Francisco, where there are huge amounts of open space laws and zoning requirements. The first problem I have with this chapter is about a concept he creates. So, if you live in an area, you may be able to vote on the area's housing laws. Let's say you live in a block of apartments and you have a nice open space that could be used for development. You would naturally vote against that if you wanted to conserve that open space and have a lovely atmosphere. Vote against it at no cost to yourself. But it does cause a cost on other people because it limits how much housing there is. So he says that there should be a cost applied to keeping that open space. You should pay for the privilege to keep that open space. Now, while this makes economic sense in terms of economic theory, this doesn't make practical sense. This isn't pragmatic at all because it's just not the way we think about housing. For example, let's say a lot of people buy houses, holiday homes, let's say on the coast for the view. They are not expecting to pay money to keep their coastal view. That's just not how the world works. And this is a problematic theory. This could never actually be implemented. The chapter I have the most problem with is the chapter that's based on the fallacy, based on the fallacical premise that public transport has not helped road congestion. And he uses statistics that say public transport has only helped in very dense areas like downtown Manhattan, where it's actually worth it. All the other times, it doesn't actually ease congestion. And he has statistics to back him up. So this is a correct point. A much better way to ease road congestion is to just build loads more roads. That's clearly the best idea, is to build more roads, right? If you wanted to ease congestion, you should do that instead of installing public transport. But the point of this argument is not wide enough. Public transport has not helped road congestion may be true, but public transport has other goals. And this is what he fails to achieve sometimes in some of his work, is that it's very, very narrow. It doesn't focus on the bigger picture. And a very important component of society and economic policy right now is the environment. And that's another goal of public transport, is to reduce emissions. If you are building more roads and subsequently easing traffic flow, essentially you're encouraging people to drive. And that's exactly the opposite of the macroeconomic objective of the government to sustain natural capital and preserve natural resources. We have to encourage shared transport, because although it won't help with road congestion, it's the other goals. You can't focus on a singular goal, that's just too narrow. However, overall, it's a very, very good book. Opened my eyes massively. Hasn't fundamentally changed my views. I still don't really agree with a lot of libertarian and conservative economics, but this is pretty fantastic. I think it gave me a new perspective on government intervention and how government failure can occur, because often government failure is a side thing in economics education, is often swept under the rug, but I think it occurs much more and much more prevalently and much more powerfully than we actually appreciate it for in economics class. So that was really interesting. The income statistics were very interesting. So overall, great read. Fantastic. See you next time.